Okay, so yeah, so in last class, yeah, what we studied in last class. I don't remember the topic. So yeah, yesterday's class we discussed about the stresses on inclined sections. So we found the normal stress and shear stress on an inclined plane, and then we found out how that normal and shear stress varies with the angle of inclination. So for yeah, we found that shear stress was maximum at the inclination of 45 degrees and minus 45 degrees. Uh, we also, and it was off the uniaxial load. We then discussed the concept of stress element, and we what else we did? Then we plotted the stress element for a uniaxial loading case in an example, and yeah, so yeah, what else we studied? I think that's it. So in today's class, will be our agenda will be this first topic, strain energy. So there are we'll study about elastic strain energy, then inelastic strain energy. Then we'll look at a linear elastic material and see what is the strain energy for that material. We'll define the concept of strain energy density, and then we'll look into the calculation of strain energy for non-uniform bars through a simple example. Stress concentration, I don't think I have the slides here, so I will not be covering that topic. So let's begin with the concept of strain energy. So here we have a uniaxial load. Here we have a prismatic bar of length L, and you are subjecting it to a uniaxial load P. So under the action of the load P, there is a deflection delta. So if you this load P is applied in a very slow manner. Okay, so that there is no dynamic or inertial effect due to the motion of the bar. So what does this dynamic and inertial effect mean? So you have a spring here, and you are placing a mass and releasing the spring. So when you do it in a slow manner, that means the spring will deform, the load will start acting and the spring will start deforming. If you release the mass abruptly, then you will have some velocity and acceleration. But when you uh, release the load very slowly in a step-by-step manner, then the velocity and acceleration are neglected and it is zero. So this state when you are applying the load in a slow manner, it is called quasi-static loading condition. So in quasi-static loading condition, suppose you take any any elongation of the spring, and there you draw the free body diagram. So you have mass mg acting downward and force fs acting upward. So the equilibrium equation will be mg minus fs, and that is equal to the acceleration. So mg minus fs is equal to mx double dot. But since you are applying the load in a very the displacement delta is taking place at a very slow rate, we can neglect that x dot double dot. So we have this equation mg minus fs will be equal to 0. So what does
Sir,
yeah
sir,
yeah
sir, is there any difference between that static loading and quasi-static loading? Because in static loading also you told the loading rate is slow and the material response is not considered. So
yeah. So here what is happening is the acceleration is 0. That means the velocity is 0, because if it's starting from rest, the velocity will be 0, and since acceleration is 0, the velocity throughout this system will be 0. So here what exactly we are doing is, in quasi-static loading, the load is applied gradually. What it means is, suppose you want to load this spring by 10 kg, you first apply 1 kg load, or say 1 gram load. and then because of that 1 gram load, this mass will deflect a small amount. Then you place another 1 gram of mass. As a result, the spring will deflect another some more amount downward. So you keep doing that gradually, and by the time you apply 999 grams, the spring will be deformed some high amount, and then you apply another 1 gram, and it will become 1 kg. Okay, so you don't apply the load in abruptly at one go. Here the load is applied very gradually, and every intermediate position. So when you apply say 2 grams, that position is in a state of equilibrium. Every intermediate position is in a state of equilibrium. That means the force balance will always be happening. If whatever spring force is there, that will be equal to the applied weight. Okay, so this is the case for quasi-static loading. So at every position, this system is in equilibrium, and the load is applied in a very gradual manner. Okay, so we can neglect this acceleration term and the velocity terms for this case. But when you consider a dynamic case, so you have here a spring, and you have mass mg and spring force upward. So the free body diagram is this one, and we have the equilibrium equation mg minus fs, that will be equal to mx double dot. So in this scenario, we are actually calculating the acceleration terms at every instant. So we are not neglecting we are considering the dynamic effects. Okay. So this problem, quasi-static loading problem, will be completely different from this dynamic problem. So in quasi-static problem, what will happen? When you load with m mass, the deflection will be mg by delta, final deflection. But if you consider this dynamic problem, this mass will never be coming to rest. It will oscillate between mg by, it will oscillate with some period of oscillation. The maximum deflection will be say 2 mg by k. So it will deflect delta naught, which is mg by k, and then it will still, because it has some kinetic energy at that extreme end, it will still deflect further, and it will have a deflection of 2 mg by k, and then it will come back, it will keep on oscillating. So we are not studying this, we are neglecting the dynamic effect when we load this spring. So in quasi-static loading, we are neglecting the acceleration term. How do we do that? We don't apply the load at a one go, we apply it very slowly, and we apply it in increments. So that is what is this quasi-static loading. So when I say that this bar is subjected to an axial load and it is loaded quasi-statically, what I mean is that this load is applied in a gradual manner. So we'll apply in small increments, delta p, and then we calculate some delta that deflection, and then we again add additional load p, and then we calculate the additional elongation. So this will happen until the final load p is reached and the final elongation delta is happening, and there is no velocity happening here. Means there is no motion of the velocity of the particles, or that is not considered. There is no acceleration of this individual mass units. Okay, so we are neglecting the mass term here. So we simply have a quasi-static loading scenario. So for this quasi-static loading scenario, we will calculate what is the work done by this load P. So what is the work done by this load P? So initially we have this length L, and then at an intermediate position, the deflection is delta 1, and the force is axial force is P1, and you keep on increasing the load. Final load is reached P, and the final deflection is delta. So what we can do, we can plot the load P versus delta deflection, load versus displacement diagram. So here we have the load versus displacement diagram. So initially we have this bar which is of length L, and then the displacement of this point is measured, that is given by this delta, and the force which is being applied on this bar is shown on the y-axis, that is the P. So the load deflection curve is here, it is shown by this red color. So we can look at an intermediate position where the deflection of this point is delta 1, and at that intermediate position the load is P1. So this value is delta 1, and this length it is P1. Now we will give a small displacement from this position to a small to the right. So the displacement is d delta 1. So because of this small displacement, yeah, we although the force will be increasing a little bit, P1 plus dP1. So we will calculate what is the work done by this force P1 for this displacement d delta 1. So that is given by this rectangular shaded area. So it will be P1 times d delta 1. Okay, so that is the work done by the force at this position for this small displacement delta d1. Now if you want to calculate the, so there is small part here which is dp1 d delta 1 by 2. That part we can neglect it because dp1 and d delta 1 are themselves very small quantities, so we can neglect that. And we can now calculate the total work done. So for total work done, the deflections will be, we have to integrate over the entire area. So it will be W is equal to 0 to delta P1 delta 1. So the as the body moves from here to here, the entire area will be covered. So the area under the low deflection curve, low displacement curve will give the work done. Okay. So this concept is yeah, the work done by the force. Now let's look at the concept of conservation of energy. This you have discussed in the where you have discussed in engineering mechanics. So we know that U1, it is the potential energy, and KE1, it is a kinetic energy, and W is the work done by all the forces other than that one causing that spring force or the gravitational force. So remaining forces, and that is equal to the final potential energy plus the final kinetic energy. So what we can do, we can send this U1 term to the right, KU1 term to the right. So we have work done by remaining forces other than gravity, spring force, and other potential energy forces. So external loads and all will come here, and also friction force will come here. So that is equal to change in potential energy plus change in kinetic energy. Since we are dealing with a quasi-static problem, this potential kinetic energy terms we can neglect it; they will be 0. So here we split the work done by into two parts. One is work done by the applied load P and work done by the frictional forces. And U2 minus U1, that is a change in potential energy. We write it as U. And we can neglect that. We can neglect the friction, or you can send the friction term to the right. Okay, so we have work done by the external load is equal to the change in the potential energy plus change in kinetic energy minus friction losses. Okay, so friction losses are neglected. So we have work done is equal to change in potential energy. So for quasi-static loading case. For dynamic case, we have to consider the kinetic energy terms. So for this specific problem, work done by the external loads is equal to the change in the potential energy. So that is what we are writing here. So work done is equal to the change in potential energy. So this potential energy, or whatever energy which is stored in the body, in this body, that we call it as strain energy. Why do we call it as strain energy? Because when you apply the load, some strains are getting, some strains are recorded, and along with it, the body is in a state of some tension or compression, and it is storing some energy, okay, some associated with the strain value. So we are denoting that term as strain energy, or sometimes they will also use the term internal work. And plus heat losses. Heat losses is that minus WF term. Okay, so that heat losses we are neglecting for this specific problem. There we assume that isothermal process, so this term we will get 0. So work done is equal to the strain energy. Whatever work is done by the external load is stored in this body as strain energy. So we represent that U value is equal to W is equal to integral 0 to delta P delta. So this is the concept of strain energy. So what are the units? Units will be Newton times force times length. Force is in Newton, and delta is in, that elongation is in meters. So we will get Newton meter. So 1 Newton meter is 1 joule. Or else you can have force in terms of that pounds and displacement in terms of feet. So you can have pound feet or Gibbs feet or pound inch. So this is for the British system or United US system. So we can think of this problem similar to a spring problem. Okay, so you can imagine this to be a spring and it is being stretched, and because this load is acting, this load will produce some whatever work is done by this load is stored as elastic energy. So that for this bars we call it as strain energy. So it is similar to the spring problem. Now what will happen if the bar is loaded in compression? So what is the strain energy of this bar? So again, when you apply the load, the bar will deform, that is it will shrink. So we'll consider an intermediate position. So in an intermediate position, the load is P1, and from P1 it is we apply it will, when the load P1 is applied, and it will deform a little amount, it will shrink a little amount by d delta 1. So the work done by this force P1 will be dW, we are representing that incremental work, that is equal to P1 d delta 1. So because P1 and d delta 1 are acting in the same direction, so this term will be positive. So the total work done, if you integrate from that original length to the shrinkle length, we will get again a positive term. So even under compression, the strain energy is still a positive quantity. So the analogy is that, as I said, it is related to the spring. Okay, so you can imagine this to be a spring. So whether you apply a tensile load in a spring, the energy stored will be positive, or if you apply a compression load also, the potential energy stored in the spring is positive. So this is regarding the strain energy term. So this is very simple because we are having a prismatic bar where we can use all these. Yeah. So what we'll do is we'll discuss the concept of elastic and inelastic strain energy. So let's look at the second scenario here. What is shown here is we are having the load deflection curve. So the load deflection curve is indicated by this green color, and this is point A. Point A is the elastic limit. So as long as the load is within applied load is within this elastic limit, the bar will deform in elastic manner, and if it exceeds it, then there will be some permanent deformations. So if we apply a load P, load PB, which is less than the elastic limit, so we apply the load, then the deflection will be some this quantity delta C, and if you unload it, the deflections will trace back the original path. So they will go from O to B, and when you unload, the stress, the load will drop from B to O. Okay, so the bar will retain it, will come to its original length. So as long as PB is less than PA, the bar will regain its original shape, and the energy stored in the bar is given by OBCO. And when unload, so when you unload the bar from PB, it will return to the original shape, and it will recover back all the elastic energy which is stored. Okay, so this energy will be recovered back. However, if you unload beyond the elastic limit, so that is what is shown here. So here what we have is the applied load PB is exceeding the elastic limit. So now we are in the plastic deformation phase. So from this point, if you unload the, if you start reducing the, decreasing the load, so the curve will, the load will reduce along this way. It will not follow this path. It will follow a path parallel to the initial slope. So the load will reduce gradually, and when zero load is reached, that is when no load is acting, the length of the bar has now increased. Okay, so it is initially L, now it is L plus this permanent L plus OD. So OD is that permanent elongation. It is also it is a permanent elongation which is taking place in the bar. And if you see what is the amount of energy which you can recover during the unloading process, that is given by this red shaded area, PDC. Okay, and this recoverable, this elongation is recovered and this area is called the elastic strain energy. And what else? Yeah, this part, the green shaded area, is lost. Okay, we cannot gain back that this part of the energy, and this energy is the inelastic strain energy. Okay, so this is regarding the elastic and inelastic strain energies. Now we will apply that strain energy concept for a linear elastic material. So linear elastic material, the load deflection curve, this is the load deflection curve for linear elastic material. We see that there is a proportionality. So if you double the load, there will be double the deflection. If you decrease the load by half, the deflection will be decreased by half. So this linearity is there. And as we said, as we discussed, the strain energy is the area under the load deflection curve. So here, this is the strain energy, and that is if the peak load is P and this is the delta. So area of the triangle will be half P delta. That is the work done by the load, or that is which is stored as strain energy. So it is P delta by 2. So for a uniaxial bar, for a prismatic bar with uniaxial load, we will have delta is PL by EA. So we can substitute instead of delta PL by EA here. So we will have P square L by 2EA. Or we can, instead of P, we can substitute EA delta by L. So for that case, we will have EA delta square by 2L. So both forms are equivalent. You can express either in terms of the applied force, or you can express in terms of the elongation, final elongation. Okay. So if you look carefully here, you can you can imagine this bar to be a spring, as I discussed before. So the spring constant K, here delta is equal to PL by A. So if you take K is equal to EA by L, you will get P is equal to K delta. Okay, so here K is a spring constant and value of spring constant is EA by L. So if you write the strain energy, it will be P square by 2 EA by L. So that is P square by 2K. Or strain energy in terms of that elongations, it will be EA by L is K. So half K delta square. So that is what we have here. So yeah, this is regarding the strain energy for a linear elastic material, isotropic material under uniaxial loading. So we'll now define another term called strain energy density. So I will take a small break and come back. Okay, so just 1 minute. Yeah. So let's look at the strain concept of strain energy density. So what is density? If you think of in terms of mass and volume, density is mass per unit volume. So when you say strain energy density, what it means is strain energy per unit volume. So that is the definition, and it is in the textbook we are using small u to represent the strain energy density. So for this bar loaded with P, the strain energy is P square L by 2A, and the volume of the bar is AL. So we can divide the strain energy by the volume. So what we have here, L and L will cancel out, and we will have P square by A square 1 by 2E. So P by A is sigma. So we get strain energy density as sigma square by 2E. or we can write the strain energy density from the deflection in terms of elongations. So we have k delta square by 2. So k is A by L and delta square by 2 here. So we divide by the volume term, it is AL. So A and A will cancel out. We'll have E by 2 delta by L whole square. So delta by L is the total elongation by the original length. So that is a strain. So we'll get that strain energy density also has half E epsilon square. So we can do another thing for linear elastic material. We have sigma is equal to E epsilon. So we can substitute instead of E epsilon, you can divide this term into two parts, E epsilon into epsilon. So E epsilon is sigma. So we can write this term as sigma epsilon by 2. So what does it mean? So if you draw the stress strain curve and we have this straight line because it is linear elastic material, that sigma epsilon by 2 indicates the area under the stress strain curve. So this is another way to look at the strain energy density. So what are the so now we'll discuss about the units of the strain energy density. So what are the units? So what we had done is we have calculated the strain energy. Strain energy is the work done. So work done is force into displacement, and strain energy density will be work done per unit volume. Okay, the strain energy per unit volume. So it is Newton meter per meter cube. So Newton meter is joule, and yeah, so you can write it like this: Newton meter per meter cube or joule per meter cube. And if you are writing in, and probably you will get, you can write it as Newton per meter square also. So it will again come back to the stress term. But physically, it looks better if you write joule per meter cube. It represents the energy stored in the material per unit volume. Okay, so this is a better way to write that same thing instead of writing Newton per meter square. So now we'll discuss two terms. One is about modulus of resilience and another one is modulus of toughness. So first one is modulus of resilience. What is this modulus of resilience? So we represent this modulus of resilience by UR, and we get that resilience by this expression. UR is sigma square PL by 2E. So what is sigma PL? Sigma PL is the proportional limit. So if you have the load deflection curve, sorry, we have the stress strain curve here, and this is a green color represents the actual stress strain diagram of the material. So up to this proportional limit, there is this, the material will behave in a linear way fashion, and as you keep applying the load, although up to A, it will become it will maintain its elasticity. So if you unload below A, it will come back, it will retrace this path, but the linearity may not be maintained. Okay, so only up to the proportional limit, the perfect straight line linearity will be maintained. Okay, so the area. So what does sigma square PL by E represent? It is the area under this curve, and yeah, so area under this stress strain curve up to the proportional limit. That is what is meant by the modulus of resilience. So we can calculate the modulus of resilience for mild steel. So for mild steel, the Young's modulus is given as 206 into 10 power 9 Newton per meter square, or yeah, so or 206 gigapascal, and proportional limit is 2.480 into 10 power 9 Newton per meter square. That is 2480 megapascal. That's too much. 2480 megapascal. Probably some mistake is there. I think it should be 10 power 6, I think. 250 megapascal is, sorry, 10 power 6, so 248. So probably this is 10 power, I think it's 10 power 8. Highly, yeah, probably it's 10 power 8. There's some mistake is there. Okay, so yeah, if this is 10 power 8, then we can calculate the modulus of resilience as sigma square PL by 2E. So in that scenario, since I calculate for 10 power 9, it's actually 10 power 8, I think. So we have to divide by 100. So it will be 14.87 kilojoule per meter cube. Okay, so please correct this. This is not 1487 kilojoule. It will be 14.87. 14.87 kilojoule per meter cube. So you can do the calculation and get the modulus of resilience. So what does this mean? So this resilience represents the ability of material to absorb and release energy within the elastic range. So suppose you are having a barrier made of mild steel, like a which will prevent the law. Suppose you are barriers means I don't know whether you have seen bollards. Bollards are fixed on the road, and they will prevent the vehicles from crossing beyond those bollards. Okay, beyond that boundary where they are put. So if the vehicle comes and hit those bollards, they will they will get damaged, but they will not breach the boundary. So there what is happening is the impact is happening on the bollards. Okay, so this the kinetic energy of the vehicle is getting absorbed by that material, and if the material has high modulus of resilience, then the material will retain its straight position, and it will not yeah, it will retain straight position but still withstand that impact. So that is what is meant by resilience. And when you come to modulus of toughness, it means the ability of material to absorb energy without fracturing. So I'll come back to the bollard example again when I discuss this. So we have this stress strain curve for the so yeah, this is the stress strain curve. I wrote, yeah, for the I didn't show the those labels sigma and epsilon, and so here we have the proportional limit, and then we have the elastic limit, and then the load keeps increasing, and there is a large ductility happening here, and the the material finally fails at this point. So the entire area under the stress strain curve, it is called the modulus of toughness. So it is a strain energy density term, but specifically since it takes the entire area, it is given as the modulus of toughness. So again, when you come to the bollard problem, that is a which are these bollards are impacted by vehicles. So when the material has high modulus of toughness, then the material will be able to withstand those loads without failing. Means the material will not break. The material may deform a large amount, so that deformation is there, but the material will not break. Okay, so that is what is meant by this concept, this term, modulus of toughness. So ability of the materials to absorb energy without fracturing. So before this load is reached, it will deform a very large amount, but it will not break. So there are other ways to define toughness. Something called fracture toughness is there. So it is different from this modulus of toughness. So in fracture toughness, what we do is we calculate the area, ligament area, and all. So we'll not discuss that. Okay, so again, the units of modulus of toughness is again joule per meter cube. So we have now described the two terms of the strain energy density: modulus of what is it? Modulus of resilience and modulus of toughness. So now we'll discuss about this strain energy calculation for non-uniform bars. So what we had done, previously we had a very simple prismatic bar, and we loaded it at the end, and we found the strain energy in that bar. Now here what we have is a bar with a varying cross section, and we have load at the end also, and loads in the intermediate region. Okay. So how do you calculate the strain energy for this bar? So what we'll do is we'll split this bar into multiple segments. So we have segment 1 here, and then segment 2 between these 2 points, and then segment 3, and segment 4, and then segment 5. Okay, so because there is a variation of cross-section area, we will have that segment 5. And yeah, here also there is a change in the, because of the intermediate load, there will be change in the axial force. That's why we are splitting it, this constant area into 2 segments. Okay, so we'll divide this into 5 segments. So we have the expression for strain energy, which is P square L by 2 EA. But here what is happening? The P value, which is the axial force, is varying throughout the length of the bar, and varying throughout each segment, and area of cross section is also varying for each segment. So we'll split this term into multiple parts. So we'll have sigma. Sigma means summation, and we'll have Ni square. Ni is the axial force, L is the length of the segment, E is the modulus of the segment, A is the area of the segment. So we'll replace this formula by this summation, Ni square Li by 2Ei, 2Ea for that particular segment. Okay. So we'll calculate this term for each segment and then add them up and get the total strain energy. So yeah, so calculation of axial force is, I think we had done it. We cut a section and then we draw the free body diagram and get the axial force, and remaining part then we square that axial force and we'll get the strain energy, and we sum up for all the segments. Now here we have a non-uniform bar. This problem is there in the homework also. We have a non-uniform bar, and the area of cross section is varying along this length of the bar. So what is the strain energy for this bar? So we apply, instead of this summation, we do an integration. So instead of, since the axial force is varying as a function of x, here area of cross section is also varying as a function of x. So length will be, say, we can cut a small section and see how that, what is the energy stored in that small section. That small section length is dx. So instead of L, we replace it with dx, and for this section there is an axial force n of x and area cross section a of x. So we have n of x and a of x. So that strain energy will be integral 0 to L n of x square dx by 2 e of x a of x. Okay, so we are finding the strain energy for this infinitesimally small volume, and then we do it the integration over the entire length. So this is the calculation for non-uniform bars, and yeah. So what we will do next is this concept to a simple example. So we have here a prismatic bar, and this multiple arrows indicate the gravitational pull acting on the bar throughout the length in the axial direction, that is in the longitudinal direction, and we have external load P acting at the one end. So the properties of the bar are modulus of elasticity E and area of cross section A, and let's say the density of the bar is rho. So we can define the unit weight gamma, which is equal to rho g. So kg per meter cube into meter per second square. So we'll have kg meter per second square by meter cube, which will be Newton per meter cube. Okay. So units of gamma will be Newton per meter cube. So what is the weight of this bar? It is density times volume. That will give the mass, and you multiply with g, will get the weight. So rho times volume is the mass, and g is the acceleration due to gravity. So rho g we denote it by gamma, and that is the unit weight, and volume is AL. AL is the area and L is the length of the bar. So you can write this force due to the gravitational pull with this expression, gamma times volume. Okay. So now we will study this. We analyze the bar. So we'll treat this body this loading as a quasi-static loading condition. That means load is incremented very gradually. The self weight also is incremented very gradually. That means the g value is not applied at one shot. G value is increased very slowly by small increments. Okay, so what is happening? We have the bar here with initial length L. So at a cross section at a distance x, we look at a small element, and the length of the element is dx. So under the applied load and the self weight, the bar will deform. So the new length will be L plus delta of L, and this point has moved by delta. So that is x plus delta, and this red part, that is a shaded area, which is we are considering for strain calculation, that has increased by dx plus d delta. So the strain in this small infinitesimal unit dx is elongation, which is d delta, by initial length, which is x. So epsilon x is d delta by dx. And now for this small segment, we'll find out what is the axial force. So we cut a cross section there, and we'll look at the bottom part. So this is the bottom part. There are two loads. One is the axial load downward, and other is the gravitational load downward. So gravitational load is gamma into volume. So volume of the bar is length of the bar into area. So this is x. So this length will be L minus x. So L minus x into area. So gamma is also written as rho g. Both are same. Okay. And so this load is acting downward. This load is acting downward. At the cut cross section, we have axial force, tensile force, N of x, acting uniformly over that area of cross section A of x. So we can calculate the axial force N of x by force balance. So N of x will be P plus rho g A L minus x. So rho g is gamma. A of x is a constant term for this specific case. So we can replace A of x with A. Now we want to find the strain energy. So we have that formula. Strain energy for this small segment is N of x square dx by 2EA. And for the entire length, so we have to do the integration from 0 to L. So N of x is P plus gamma unit weight times A into L minus x. So that is what is here, square dx by 2A. Now we will have A plus B whole square. So A square plus B square plus 2AB. So A square is P square, and this gamma square A square by L minus x square, and 2P gamma A L minus x by 2EA. So here we'll have P square dx. So if you integrate, you'll get P square L. Here we have L minus x square. So you can write it as, I think if you change the limits and all, you can get x square. So it will be L cube by 3. So it will be L cube by 6. And here we have L minus x. We can replace it with x dx, and we'll have L square by 2. So yeah, this two will cancel it, and again we'll get L square by 2. So we'll have gamma P L square by 2E. So here A term cancel out, and we have this term. So this is due to A square term, this is due to B square term, and this is due to the 2AB term. Okay. So let's look closely for this term. So P square L by 2A, what is it? It is a strain energy of the bar which is loaded at the end. Okay. So that is P square L by 2A. And what is this? This is the strain energy of a bar only with sulfate only. Okay. There is only gravitational load acting, and then that strain energy is due to sulfate. And this is the extra term which is depends both on the applied load P and also on the sulfate gamma. Okay. So what this thing means is that strain energy of this bar plus strain energy of this bar is not equal to the strain energy of both sulfate and load P. Okay, that is what this thing means. There is one extra term coming, which is a coupling between the applied load and the external load and this sulfate. Okay. So strain energy of the individual loads is not equal to the strain energy of the combined loads. So yeah, because it is a square term, we are not having N of x, simply N of x, we are having N of x square. So because of that squaring term, we are having some extra terms. So the linearity is not preserved. So we cannot calculate. So if you want to calculate strain energy for this system, you cannot divide into two parts, one with only sulfate and another one only with external load, and then we can't do that. We have to consider all the weights combined together and then calculate the strain energy terms. Okay, so this is regarding the strain energy, and I think I will end the class now because I don't have slides further to show.